"Who do you think you are, wandering around here, you trash? We cops don't like black people like you driving through. Black people don't belong in this place," Officer Ryan Caldwell growled, a malicious smile spreading across his face as he handcuffed Major General Cassandra Moore, a federal military officer, right in the street. What he didn't know was that the woman he was insulting held the authority to shut down the entire system he was hiding behind. Which state are you in? What makes your state unique? Drop a comment. McRae County at midday in August was bathed in harsh sunlight and a heavy atmosphere that seemed to slow every movement. Parched fields stretched along Highway 14. Deserted, with only a few old traffic cameras coated in dust hanging loosely from weathered utility poles. A black car with federal plates glided over the scorching road, its motion smooth like the steady breath of its driver. Behind it, a local police patrol vehicle appeared around a curve, deliberately keeping its distance. Cassandra Moore held the steering wheel with near-mechanical control. Her eyes, behind sunglasses, briefly flicked to the rearview mirror, enough to catch an unusual sign. She neither accelerated nor changed direction, only slowly adjusted her posture, her right hand lightly touching a thin leather wallet on the passenger seat, where her military ID was kept, but she did not take it out. Wearing a neat olive shirt, dark khaki pants, and soft sand-colored shoes, she looked like a federal employee on vacation. No one would guess the black woman inside once commanded over 2,000 soldiers in a war zone. A monotone sound pierced the air, a short siren blast like a sharp blade cutting through silence. Cassandra pulled over without hesitation. Her stop was slow but decisive, as if accustomed to situations demanding absolute mental discipline. She removed her glasses and looked through the rearview mirror. No need to guess, the officer stepping out was exactly the type she had been wary of. Ryan Caldwell wore a dark blue police uniform, his collar unbuttoned by one notch, eyes squinting as if trying to see through the car window to guess the identity of the woman inside. His steps were heavy and purposeful, hand close to the holstered gun at his waist. He did not look at the license plate or check any technical details, focusing solely on the driver. Cassandra lowered the left window, her voice calm but clear. "How can I help you?" The question sounded like a warning, neither too soft nor confrontational. Caldwell did not answer immediately. He glanced at his partner behind, then stepped closer to the car. "Hey, Abe, your car's tail light looks cracked," he said, eyes fixed on her face. Cassandra tilted her head slightly, eyes steady. "I checked it this morning. Maybe you're mistaken." He smirked, a half smile, voice hardened. "If I say there's a problem, there is. Born to argue, huh? Where are you going? What are you doing here?" "A car from D.C. Rare to see someone like you passing through, McRave." Her gaze paused a second, then turned cold. She did not reply immediately, but slowly opened the document holder, sliding her license out the window. Caldwell took it, glanced over, then showed clear indifference as he tossed it back inside. He didn't bother asking for her name or job. His questions were not from legitimate suspicion, but from prejudice. "You live in D.C.? What do you do there?" he pressed on, his tone now mocking. "Government worker? Or just someone with connections?" Cassandra looked straight into his eyes. She did not raise her eyebrows or force a smile. Her expression remained unchanged, but her eyes clearly said she knew exactly what was happening and was ready for the worst. Behind, the second officer stood silently, eyes scanning to assess both reactions. No one smiled or spoke. In that silence, an invisible tension tightened, as if McRae had never welcomed someone like Cassandra Moore, nor prepared for what would happen next. "What's your purpose here?" Ryan Caldwell asked, his voice almost commanding. Cassandra looked at him for a moment before replying. "Just passing through, business in the southern part of the state." Her tone remained even, showing no notable emotion. The license had already been shown, resting on the passenger seat. "You know, we don't like black people driving through here," Caldwell said, lowering his voice but full of implication. "Black people don't belong here." The words "black people" were emphasized like an invisible dagger aimed straight at Cassandra. She sensed the racism in every word and gesture, but did not let emotion take over. She had faced such situations before, in the military and beyond. "I have not broken any traffic laws," she said firmly, but not loudly. "If there's no specific reason, I request to continue my journey." Caldwell laughed loudly, a scornful laugh, breaking the silence. "Continue your journey? Who do you think you are to order me around?" He stepped closer, deliberately invading her personal space. A second patrol car appeared. 2 more officers got out, standing behind Caldwell as if rehearsing a scripted act. One, a shorter man with brown hair, chuckled and whispered to a colleague, "You should know your place. I say you're guilty, you're guilty," Caldwell continued, his tone now mixing mockery and threat. "We don't need troublemakers like you and McGrath." Cassandra clenched her hands, but her face remained unchanged. She realized revealing her identity now would only escalate tension. Instead, she chose to memorize every detail, Caldwell's name, badge number, and his disdainful gaze. Caldwell ordered a search of her car, but it was clearly an excuse to buy time. The other officers rummaged through the vehicle, opened the trunk, checked the back seats, but found nothing unusual. Cassandra stood watching coldly. She knew they were provoking her, but gave no reason to escalate. Without warning, he grabbed Cassandra's wrist and cuffed her. She did not resist. She let her arm be pulled behind her, eyes fixed forward, not meeting his gaze but looking beyond him, as if toward a higher, distant place. In the moment the handcuffs clicked shut, the space seemed to thicken. Ryan saw clearly she was neither afraid nor angry. There was something quiet and dangerous waiting. It was in that calmness he began to feel uneasy, because no one stays still like that unless they know exactly what is coming next. Finally, Caldwell turned back and threw her license at her, but did not allow her to leave. "You're coming with us," he said, his voice commanding. "There are some issues to clarify." When Cassandra asked for specifics, he shrugged and gave a sly smile. "You'll know when we get there." Cassandra was ordered into the patrol car, hands cuffed behind her. The metallic clang of the cuffs mixed with the officers' mocking laughter. But even as she was pushed into the back seat, she held her back straight, her eyes unwavering. She knew this was just the beginning, and she would not let men like Caldwell win. Could she be convicted like the others Ryan had targeted before? Ryan Caldwell did not know. He had just stepped into a spiral he could not escape. The cold click of the handcuffs echoed sharply in the scorching midday sun. Cassandra stood straight, her hands cuffed behind her back, her head held high, eyes fixed forward as if observing something far beyond those around her. Sweat beaded at her temples, yet her face remained composed. Her posture beneath the summer sun of McRobb was like an immovable landmark, forcing every gaze to pause. In the distance, a silver SUV pulled over to the roadside. The window rolled down, an arm lifted a phone to record. The officers noticed, but paid no mind. Ryan Caldwell stepped back, exhaled audibly, then laughed as if winning a cheap hand. He glanced at Cassandra, lips curling into a mocking smile. "Think you're so special, huh?" he said, nodding as if talking to himself. "Nice car. Decent clothes, but in the end you're still cuffed." The second officer, who had seemed cautious before, now joined in with a knowing smirk. "Same type," he murmured, just loud enough for Cassandra to hear, "always pretending to be better." Ryan looked over and spoke louder, deliberately so the video would capture it. "From D.C., huh? Must be someone with connections. But here, no one's above the law." He stressed the word law as if it were his personal authority. A hot wind stirred Cassandra's shirt hem. Dust clung to her pant legs. Her gaze remained steady, silent. That silence made the officer's words feel crude, like striking a cold, unresponsive wall. A pickup truck passed slowly, the driver glancing at Cassandra with curiosity before looking at Ryan for confirmation. They did not know the full story, but skin color, handcuffs, and the uniform of the man in charge were enough to form a quick judgment. Ryan adjusted his uniform, clicked on the radio, and raised his voice unnecessarily. "We have a female suspect resisting a vehicle check. showing signs of non-cooperation. Each word was clear but not truthful. To him, speaking on camera was about shaping the narrative, not reporting facts. Cassandra remained silent. In her mind, every detail was logged. Tone, expression, patrol car camera position, wind direction, lighting, even the angle of the stranger's phone recording. She stood as a living witness, not just to this incident, but to the entire system it represented. Ryan turned to look at her again, expecting a reaction, a defense, even a hint of panic, but he met only a cold, unwavering stare. That attitude unnerved him more than any insult could, because the woman cuffed before him was not afraid, and in his eyes, that was the real threat. Cassandra stood still, wrists locked behind her, breathing measured like a soldier's marching cadence. No unnecessary movements, no distracted glances. In her mind, every moment was arranged in cold order, like a strategist calculating the next move. They thought they had won, but they never truly had the chance. They don't know who I am, she thought, and that's their first mistake. Her eyes scanned each person. Ryan Caldwell continued talking, hands on hips, chin raised, spitting arrogant words. His partner stood quietly at the edge, eyes beginning to waver. Further away, the videographer held a position. Cassandra glanced briefly at the phone, just a look, but enough to make the filmer hesitate, as if caught on the wrong side of a game they didn't fully understand. She said nothing. Ryan talked more, digging into trivial details, from the license plate to her clothing. He aimed to break the silence, but what he did not realize was that silence was not powerlessness. It was the silence of one familiar with true power, the kind that does not need to shout to be heard. A few passers-by stopped across the street, hesitant to approach, but their eyes filled with conflicted feelings. They saw a woman cuffed, but no trace of panic or fear on her face. Something didn't add up. Cassandra did not look like someone being arrested. She looked like someone waiting for the exact moment to press the trigger. Ryan grew impatient. His voice hardened, repeating questions about her purpose here and whether anyone else was in the car, then signaled his partner. But no matter how much he pressed, Cassandra's answer was silence. Silence that seemed to thicken the air. For a few seconds, she looked directly into his eyes. No avoidance, no concealment. That gaze made Ryan swallow hard. There was something in those eyes that made the other feel they had stepped beyond a boundary without knowing the way back. When he motioned to push her toward the patrol car, Cassandra turned her head just enough to say quietly, "You don't know what you just did." Ryan froze briefly. The words were not loud or threatening, yet they landed like a stone on the road. Those nearby did not grasp the full meaning, but all sensed one thing. This was far from over. Cassandra was pushed into the back seat, but kept her back straight, eyes steady. Through the tinted glass, she looked out, not to watch her captors, but to see beyond them, to places they could not reach. The game had just begun, and those holding the cards did not realize they were sitting at the wrong table. The heavy iron gate of McRae County Detention Center slid open with a slow, dragging sound. The patrol car rolled inside, tires crunching over worn gravel and dry old leaves. The prison complex emerged beyond the gray concrete walls, nearly 4 meters tall, stained with rain and time. A camera, mounted on the corner of the wall, faced the front yard, but its lens was angled aside and covered with a thick layer of dust, barely recognizable. Cassandra sat quietly in the back, her wrists still cuffed. The car door opened and 2 officers escorted her into the main corridor. The fluorescent lights from the ceiling cast a pale yellow glow, weak and flickering, creating faint shadows that stretched like silent streaks of dirt. There were no mirrors, no clocks on the walls, just the faded gray paint and the feeling that everything was slowly closing in. The front desk officer did not ask her a single question. He simply looked at her papers, nodded, and jotted a few lines in the logbook. His dry voice came from behind the desk. "Take her to the single cell, room 2B. His eyes never left the screen, his demeanor like handling a package sent from another warehouse. Cassandra was led through 3 iron doors, each opened with a different key, clicking like the steady beats of a system accustomed to locking people away in silence. At the end of the hallway, instead of being taken to the general population, she was directed left. A row of solitary cells appeared, small, thick-walled, soundproof. The guide said simply, "Isolation for safety," but Cassandra knew it was how they separated her from anything she could observe or remember inside. Room 2B was a concrete box in every sense, about 2.5 meters wide, with a metal bed welded to the wall, a small unenclosed toilet, and a ventilation grate near the ceiling. She entered without a word, then turned her head once before the door shut. The sound echoed inside like a temporary conclusion, dry, decisive, and full of calculation. She sat on the bed, eyes scanning around. There was a camera on the wall, but it was placed too high and angled poorly. She tilted her head, examined the lens closely, then nodded slightly, confirming it was a fake model. In a corner, the vent showed signs of repair, the protective mesh freshly replaced. Across the wall was an old scratch, like someone had tried to leave a signal, but it had been erased halfway. She leaned slightly, listening to footsteps outside. 3 staff members, one heavy step, one slow and short, the last wearing thin-soled shoes. The duty roster was not posted, but the sequence of door openings suggested shifts changed every 6 hours. She realized this prison showed no obvious flaws. It was designed so that no one could see anything. But the real control was not in the walls, it was in measuring every reaction of the detainees within boundaries they set. Cassandra sat quietly, head bowed slightly, eyes open, not afraid, not angry. Her mind was sharp like a blade hidden beneath calm fabric. What did they think she was? A black woman arrested? Someone powerless? Or a person who could break under pressure? She knew all they thought, and knew the one thing they hadn't yet considered. They didn't bring me here because I'm dangerous, she thought. They brought me because I make them lose control of their reactions, and that's what truly scares them. The cell door opened silently. A middle-aged man in a pale gray shirt stepped in, carrying a tightly clipped file folder, his expression unreadable. He gave no name, came alone, and brought no lawyer or witnesses. The way he sat across from Cassandra and opened the folder was as if they were preparing to sign a leave form, not processing a civil arrest. "I'm here to clarify some administrative procedures," he said evenly, as if reciting a phrase he had said thousands of times. He flipped through the pages, stopping at the first sheet, sliding it toward her without looking up. "Just confirm your statement. Sign, and we finish early." Cassandra looked at the file. White paper, official font, the first line boldly printed with her name. The content was written in a one-sided style, with no sign of objective investigation. She was accused of disturbing the peace, obstructing officers, refusing to cooperate, showing signs of resistance and posing a potential security threat in the area. There was no mention of her being searched without cause, publicly handcuffed, or the police group's misconduct contrary to civil check procedures. The man glanced at her from the corner of his eye. "It's minor. If you sign, you'll be reviewed for release tomorrow morning. Lighter file, suspended sentence, no deep investigation." Cassandra held the papers a few seconds longer. She read every word. Each sentence seemed to wait for her nod to complete a neat process. Silenced, without trouble or delay. He didn't need her to admit guilt. He needed her to agree they were right. "You know, your silence can be misunderstood," he continued, voice sweet as honey. "In some cases of non-cooperation, we have to escalate to the federal level. Then things get out of control." Cassandra put the file down on the table, softly twirled a pen in her hand, then set it beside the paper. She looked up, eyes locked on him. "I've read it, and I can stay here a few more days if needed, but I won't sign anything I haven't done." His face twitched briefly, but he quickly masked it with a slight nod. "You seem to understand the system, so you probably know refusing cooperation usually leads to bigger trouble." She said nothing. The silence lasted just enough to avoid provocation, yet thickened the air. The man gathered his papers and stood up. Before leaving, he paused without turning back. "Opportunities don't come often, Ms. Moore. Next time I won't bring options." The door closed. Cassandra remained seated, hands on the table, staring at the opposite wall as if he still stood there. She knew exactly what they were doing. The indictment was a trap, wrapped in simultaneous temptation and threat. One signature could grant temporary freedom, but also meant locking the path to counterattack. She returned to the cell with steady steps, unhurried, back straight, eyes bright. The cell door shut behind her again, but this time inside was no longer just defense. In silence, Cassandra began reorganizing her memories. The plan was no longer if, but when. And when the time came, every line in today's indictment would become evidence for a much larger truth. Cassandra returned to the cell with slow steps, her head slightly bowed as if weary after a prolonged interrogation. The iron door closed behind her with a cold, sharp clang. She paused briefly, not rushing to sit. Her eyes flicked upward toward the ceiling, where the camera hung tilted to the right corner, just as she had noted the day before. The lens still pointed away from the main frame. The bed area near the restroom lay beyond its view. She had checked this 3 times already. Now it was time to act. With a subtle motion like scratching fabric, Cassandra slid her hand inside the hem of her pants. A small, loose thread revealed a tiny, almost transparent piece of paper. She pulled it out, placed it in her palm, then sat on the edge of the bed, bending slowly as if tying her shoelaces. Her other hand slipped under the bed, where a small rectangular plastic cover had been loosened earlier. Behind the cover was a hollow compartment just big enough to conceal an oval object. Smaller than a palm, rough-textured and grayish like the worn casing of an old coin. Cassandra activated the device with a 6-tap code. The screen remained blank. Only a faint green light flashed after 2 seconds. She inserted a SIM card into a hidden slot behind the device's shell, entered a security code memorized beforehand, then held down the transmit button for 7 seconds. The device vibrated once, sending a signal through an encrypted responsive network, enough to break the information isolation McRae County had built. After nearly 2 minutes, the device vibrated softly again. Cassandra pressed it to her ear, securing it with 2 fingers. No ringing sound came. A deep, low male voice spoke directly, as if waiting on the other end. "Cassandra, quick report." She responded crisply, measured. Location, McRae County Detention Solitary 2B. Unlawfully detained, no legal representation. False charges, resisting noncompliance. Officer in charge, Ryan Caldwell. Codename Rook Delta. Status, emergency. The voice on the line did not change. "Confirmed. Response time 6 hours. Maintain a defense posture, no further contact." She said nothing more. Folding the device, she snapped it in half along a pre-designed break. The small chip separated from its casing. She slid it behind, pushing it deep into the drain pipe beneath the toilet bowl with her fingertip. The clear clink of the object dropping into metal marked the final trace of the device's existence. Cassandra washed her hands under cold water, dried them on her sleeve, and then returned to the bed. Sitting down, back against the wall, head tilted slightly back, eyes open. The feeling in her chest was not relief. It was sharp and still, like a drawn bowstring waiting for the slightest touch to snap forward. She knew time was no longer slow. 6 hours later, everything would change. And when it did, no one in this detention center would be prepared. Her gaze was no longer that of a detained woman silently waiting. It had shifted. It aimed directly at the other door, where a system still believed it held control. The afternoon passed in unusual silence. McRae County Detention operated on its usual rhythm, routine security checks, guard shifts rotating as programmed, until the low rumble of black vehicles sounded simultaneously at the main gate, catching the administrative area off guard. 5 unmarked SUVs lined up, doors closed, dark-tinted windows blocking any view inside. No sirens, no introduction, but their presence froze the watch station for several seconds. The duty officer quickly radioed in a hoarse voice, urgency apparent. Internal messages were relayed to superiors within a minute. Ryan Caldwell, sitting in his office, heard the report through his earpiece. He smirked, shrugged, and glanced at his partner. "Federal admin inspections again." Probably a surprise audit on detention procedures. He stepped out, adjusted his collar, casual as if used to circumventing such routine inspections. The gate opened slowly. The first to step down was a tall man, shoulders straight, steps precise, dressed in a perfectly tailored dark suit. No badge or visible name tag, but when he presented a card stamped with a special red seal, the gate guard did not ask further and immediately released the latch. The man spoke little, proceeding directly inside. Behind him were two senior security officers, faces discreet yet decisive. As Ryan reached the main hall, the man had already passed through the checkpoint without looking at anyone. A detention officer tried to block him, but one glance made him freeze mid-action. "I need to see Cassandra Moore," the man said, voice not loud but resonant enough to seem as if the room itself receded. "She is currently held in solitary 2B. Ryan frowned, stepping forward. "Who did you say?" The man turned, his cold gaze extinguishing. Under the soft yellow light of the temporary military base office, Cassandra sat silently before a screen displaying McRae County's internal files. Her face showed no emotion, yet her eyes scanned each line as if dissecting layers that concealed the truth. Surveillance data, administrative reports, and digital records related to her arrest were uploaded one after another. A legal analysis team from the Department of Defense had issued an initial conclusion. The arrest process was severely flawed, showing signs of abuse of power and racial bias in both speech and conduct. Cassandra pressed a command key, accessing deeper into the McRae Police Department's internal system. Her general's clearance allowed her to bypass security layers unreachable even by the local mayor. She skimmed the final lines, inhaled deeply, then stood up. On the desk lay a printed document from the secure server, the suspension order for Officer Ryan Caldwell. Under federal authority granted for this special situation, Cassandra signed at the bottom with ink as sharp as a blade. Just hours later, a joint task force led by civil rights inspectors and military overseers arrived at the McRae Police Department. The local sheriff hurried to oppose, arguing that the decision required city council approval. Yet the Department of Defense representative simply raised the order, unwavering. This authority lies beyond local reach. Objections quickly faded into silence. Ryan Caldwell was on duty when notified. An internal affairs officer entered, placing a thick envelope on his desk. He opened it, read a few lines, then folded it quickly, struggling to keep calm. A security officer nearby demanded he surrender his weapon and badge. Initial shock turned to restrained anger, but all were powerless under federal oversight. Cassandra appeared shortly after, entering in crisp uniform, her face calm to cold. She stopped before Ryan, staring without blinking. "You have 7 days to prepare your explanation," she said evenly and low, "but I think your explanation is no longer necessary." Ryan opened his mouth to respond, but was cut off by another officer, ordering him to leave immediately. For the first time since meeting Cassandra, he fell completely silent. The atmosphere inside the police station grew heavy. Some avoided looking at Ryan as he walked down the hall. Others quietly turned their backs or hurried to organize files. No one spoke, but the air was thick. Security cameras captured him exiting the building, holding the envelope, his steps heavy. No laughter, no taunts like that day on the street, only silence, as if the system he once trusted as inviolable had just cracked wide open. Cassandra returned to her office, placing the signed document into the closed case files. In her heart, this was not yet victory, but it was the first message, strong and impossible to ignore. The power game had begun to shift. This time, she was the one making the opening move. News of Officer Ryan Caldwell's suspension spread rapidly across all media platforms. Morning television broadcasts were flooded with images of Cassandra leaving the military base, the scrolling headline, "General Moore takes action," appearing repeatedly. Conservative media quickly seized the moment, blasting headlines, "Black female general abuses power," "Personal revenge or masked justice." Reports analyzed race, authority, and the long-standing conflict between military and police, turning an administrative decision into a symbolic racial battle. Social media split public opinion sharply. One side praised Cassandra as a brave figure standing against wrongdoing, the other attacked fiercely. accusing her of abusing her position for personal vengeance, even fabricating stories of past conflicts with Caldwell. Videos from her arrest day were recirculated but cleverly edited, distorting events. The hashtag #BackTheBlue reemerged, alongside posts defending the police and condemning the guilty. Public outrage extended beyond online spaces. Once, as Cassandra left headquarters to attend an internal oversight meeting, a man rushed from the crowd, throwing a half-drunk plastic bottle at her while shouting, "So black folks get protection and can do whatever they want?" Security forces immediately restrained the man but did not arrest him. Local police explained the act did not meet the threshold of criminal violence, fueling quiet resentment among followers watching the case. Cassandra made no public comment. Press requests for a briefing flooded her senior assistant's inbox, but she declined. "If I must explain, it's not to them, but to those unjustly imprisoned." Her calm face appeared before the public, yet her eyes had changed, not out of fear, but because she began to sense the harsh reality that a social prejudice battle could bring. Inside her office, some close associates started hesitating. Some suggested stepping back temporarily to cool public opinion. Legal advisors warned that a deeper investigation would pit her not only against individuals, but a system deeply rooted in local structures for years. Cassandra listened quietly, but made no immediate response. She sat silently, gazing through the window at the still courtyard, as if reading an invisible report only she understood. A few days later, she wrote a single line on the whiteboard in the investigation team's meeting room. "Justice does not need to be loved. It needs to be proven." Those who had wavered now looked at her differently. Not everyone could keep up, but they understood she did not seek instant approval. She was on a long path where the price of righteousness was loneliness and pain. Amidst criticism and distortion, Cassandra stood tall, not because she had never been hurt, but because she understood that what mattered was not making people like her, but ensuring the truth was not buried. And at that moment, she began to feel the strongest resistance, isolation from those who once cheered her on. Yet in Cassandra's eyes, a persistent spark still burned, like the first crack on old ice, slow but irreversible. A video less than a minute long first appeared on a personal account with few followers, but within hours it spread across social media. The shaky footage, shot from inside a car at a tilted angle, captured a black woman in a gray shirt handcuffed and standing under the harsh sun. Behind her were two police officers, one laughing loudly, the other folding his arms, as if enjoying cheap entertainment. Beneath the cuffs, the woman neither struggled nor shouted. She stood upright, her gaze distant. At the video's end, a young woman inside the car murmured, "What the hell is going on?" The debate erupted almost immediately. Voices rose from black communities and human rights groups, claiming this was a clear example of abuse of power and racial discrimination. Comments flooded in. "Another case? She wasn't resisting and still treated like that? What are the police doing?" Conversely, some expressed skepticism, even hostility. Does anyone know what really happened? Maybe she did something earlier. If she was innocent, why arrest her? These questions were not evidence-based, but grounded in assumptions about absolute police authority and public submission. Within a day, hashtags dominated social media feeds. Justice for Cassandra called for transparency and a public investigation. Abuse of power condemned McRae County officers' brutality and unprofessionalism. Meanwhile, far-right groups launched counter hashtags like "Not Above the Law," arguing no one, including military personnel, is above civil procedures. Some anonymous accounts pushed conspiracies, claiming the woman was exploiting military status to evade justice, that it's all a setup to stir racial tensions. Traditional media began reporting cautiously, largely neutral and avoiding direct conclusions. Major outlets posted updates like "under investigation" and "identity not yet confirmed." Meanwhile, far-right podcasts and extremist political commentators exploited the ambiguity with sensational tones. Headlines screamed, "Female soldier arrested after refusing police cooperation. Why is she silent? What is her true identity? Commentary was laden with insinuation, both sowing doubt and provoking emotions. Black communities started sharing similar personal experiences of cold police treatment, being stopped without cause, scrutinized because of skin color. These stories fueled growing empathy, extending beyond their communities to those previously silent. In McRae County, where the incident occurred, residents felt defensive. Many posted in support of Officer Ryan Caldwell, describing him as a serious law enforcer, a public servant under high pressure. A small faction created forums backing local police, condemning media exaggeration, and asserting, "This is a campaign against police in conservative areas." By the third day's end, social media was no longer a truth-seeking platform. It became a battleground of words, where biased footage and emotions outweighed facts. Some called it a human rights violation. Others branded it a staged act. Amid the noise, the truth was buried under thousands of comments, posts, analysis videos, and tens of millions of shares, no one knowing what truly happened. The iron gates of McRae detention rattled as a crowd outside shouted. Megaphones echoed like sonic blasts against thick concrete. They carried banners with bold letters. "Cassandra Moore is a threat. No one above the law." Some threw water bottles at the gate. The glass shattered, but guards quickly quelled it. Among them were unfamiliar faces alongside known extremists identified in past protests, court breaches, and opposition to federal orders. Inside the holding cell, Cassandra heard the chants. The words were unclear, but their rhythm and volume signaled hostility. In the cramped room, she didn't need to look outside to know who they targeted. The crowd didn't know the facts, but didn't need reasons to hate. They only needed a name, a skin color, a symbol to vent their rage. Online, images of Cassandra in youthful camouflage circulated with cruel captions. Some posted family photos, digging into the brother's death from a stroke, twisting it into a false story of a family with a criminal record. Several accounts bearing far-right logos spread rumors that she had been disciplined for excessive command behavior. No evidence was offered, yet each post was shared thousands of times as if likes could turn lies into truth. Within the military system, those who served with her faced difficulties. They received messages ordering no comments until official instructions. Some old colleagues wanted to speak out but were reminded to preserve the organization's image. Cassandra understood this. She never expected anyone to speak for her in tough times. She knew better than anyone. Military loyalty is measured not by the speed of sharing, but by the silence that waits for the final strike. She did not respond to any reporters. She sent no messages outside, wrote nothing online. Media converged on her old base, but only received one internal message: keep silent. When truth speaks, we don't need to shout. Yet hatred did not stop at words. A package, addressed to her with her rank insignia, was sent to the base where she once served. Thanks to security checks, it was held before delivery. The EOD unit reported the package contained incendiary materials, along with a handwritten note. "We will take care of the rest." For the first time, what began on social media crossed into physical violence. On extremist podcasts, people even questioned her rank. How could someone like her rise to general? Did she really command any unit? These subtle digs did not attack openly, but quietly hollowed out her honor. Amid the storm, Cassandra remained unchanged. She wrote by hand in a small notebook issued in the detention center. Her handwriting was steady, each line without erasure. Every day she wrote exactly one sentence, as if engraving it in stone. That day the sentence was, "The challenge is not the insults. The challenge is to keep reason when everyone wants you to lose control." Immediately after being removed from solitary confinement, Cassandra requested to work independently in the Central Archive Room of the McRae County Department of Justice. The minister did not directly intervene, but granted her special access to all records related to arrests and internal processing in the past 48 hours. She made no declarations or orders, sending only a brief document, verify signs of administrative misconduct within McRae County law enforcement. A single sentence, yet enough to compel all departments to open their entire systems to her. In a small room with 4 monitors displaying data simultaneously, Cassandra began with camera footage. She selected the body cam attached to Ryan Caldwell, entering the retrieval code. The system returned an error that made her pause exactly 3 seconds. File corrupted, incompatible format. She tried 3 different timestamps before and after the traffic stop, all showing errors. Switching to the patrol car's dash cam, the system reported device not recently synchronized, no data available. She entered a deeper code to request the synchronization log. The results revealed that a disconnection occurred precisely when she was handcuffed on the road. One device failing might be a coincidence. 3 devices malfunctioning simultaneously on the same day was something else. Cassandra recorded all timestamps and error sequences, printing 2 copies. Without further comment, she moved on to the next data set, tracing peripheral evidence. She accessed the Pentagon's analysis network, logging in with a special emergency key. She searched all uploads from McRae during her detention window. The system scanned hundreds of short videos, live stream clips, and audio recordings. A 12-second video caught her attention, shot from a very low angle, featuring a man yelling and a woman silent between 2 officers. The video had been reported and removed from the platform shortly after posting. Cassandra contacted that user account via the internal network, verifying location data. The user, a local student, still retained a draft on their phone. Cassandra sent a remote access authentication code and downloaded the original clip within minutes. Clear enough to see Ryan Caldwell smiling, hand-shaking handcuffs in front of Cassandra. The footage was grainy and brief, but her eyes in that moment were unmistakable. A living piece of evidence. Incomplete, but an important starting point. Next, she requested access to internal login logs of the jail's record management system. Under the guise of procedural cross-checking, she reviewed every login and edit related to her processing record. One entry stood out, an access by an administrative staff member named Brent Lively, 29 minutes after she was handcuffed. This action did not match any official report timestamps. The printed files, edit times, and attached documents all aligned. Brent had changed the reason for arrest from traffic stop to resisting arrest, uncooperative behavior. This was not in the original report. Cassandra made no comment. She saved all data onto an encrypted secure device and reported directly to the minister's office. Exiting the archive room, her expression remained unchanged, but her grip tightened noticeably. Although the system had tried to conceal, each piece left a trace, and she was retracing every mark. There was no technical fault here, no coincidence, only hands hidden in the shadows, thinking, elating. A file erased the truth. They were wrong, and Cassandra would be the one to make them pay for that mistake. She sat alone in a temporary workspace inside the internal surveillance area. Before her was a data table listing over 20 arrests in McRae County over the past 3 years. Each line represented a person, a timestamp, and a case file number. But what lay behind the numbers revealed something far more horrifying. Nearly 90% of those arrested were people of color. The reasons recorded in most cases: disturbing the peace, resisting arrest, and failing to cooperate. The situation descriptions matched exactly how they described her. Confession signatures were always within 24 hours, and no lawyer consultation records were attached. She skimmed through files, opening 4 processing reports at once. The format was suspiciously identical. The language in reports hardly varied. Passages describing resisting behavior seemed copied from a master document and pasted into each file. Some sentences matched punctuation and phrasing exactly. Name and date fields showed signs of being manually filled last. Cassandra sat silently, examining the copy-pasted texts, saving internal screenshots. A processing system recycling everything like a formula: arrest, charge drafting, confession signing, and file closure. She accessed personnel files to check the names of officials involved in these administrative cases. 3 names repeatedly appeared: an officer in charge of intake checks, an administrative staffer responsible for data updates, and a team leader approving files. No signs of internal dissent, no opposing opinions. She found 5 cases where the system recorded processing delayed due to insufficient grounds. All 5 matched the name of an official recently transferred out of McRab. All 5 matched the name of an official recently transferred out of McRab. This person had opposed the template prosecutions. His personnel record was labeled transferred due to incompatibility with internal structure. Cassandra moved on to older data, searching for those accused similarly. A long list appeared, but most had left the state, lost contact, or had no updated addresses. She checked addresses, marking 3 reachable cases, but focused especially on one name: Eric Denman, the only person still detained at McRabe, with a record noting repeated resistance to law enforcement. Arrested over a year ago, no lawyer, no relatives confirmed. Cassandra noted this name and requested a direct meeting, citing case reassessment for retrial. She stood, looking at the screen displaying data columns of names, charges, detention times, repeated like a programmed chain. Each person in that list was a link in a system blinded by silence, until someone refused to sign, until someone saw the pattern. Cassandra needed no loud declarations or threats, but in the moment her eyes rested on the last line of the data table, she whispered almost inaudibly, "This didn't start with me, but I will be the one to end it." The second-floor meeting room of the McRab County Administrative Building was repurposed as a temporary command center. Local maps covered both walls, and the police department's outdated servers were connected to an independent analysis system brought in by the military. Cassandra stood at the far end of the room, arms crossed, observing the screen displaying recovered data line by line. Her expression remained neutral, but her eyes grew colder with each vanished piece of information. The technical team began by cross-referencing reports related to Cassandra's arrest. The first results caused a brief silence. The internal systems record showed temporary arrest report, temporary administrative form 9A, with no signature, no clear start time for the procedure, nor the officer who filed it. Access logs recorded the latest edit in the early hours of the next day, performed by a high-level admin account, but the username was encrypted as a null character. The department's security system was set to overwrite edited data every 24 hours, meaning this was done precisely at a time impossible to trace back. Expanding the investigation to the camera system, the team uncovered another anomaly. At the administrative area, where Cassandra was taken to sign the repo, all video footage from that time slot was tagged as signal failure. The remaining cameras operated normally. Only the corridor leading to the monitoring room and data storage showed errors. One technician quietly remarked, frustration evident in his voice, "The software recorded video signals cutting in and out, like someone deliberately disrupted the network intermittently." Cassandra glanced at the list of system users with access permissions in the past 3 months. She did not focus on names but on login times, task types performed, and the number of actions on each file. A pattern began to emerge. All manipulated files fell into 2 fixed time windows: midnight and early morning shift changes, always using managerial accounts, and always involving cases connected to Black individuals. Beneath the remaining data was an internal email folder, most of which was deleted or corrupted. In civilian environments, communication channels must be fully archived as plain text without personal encryption. This only happened in units dealing with sensitive data or attempting to hide something. A legal team member sighed, placing a hand on the freshly printed documents. "We have no originals. Everything now is a rewritten shell. None contains objective descriptions. All use language that presumes guilt." The McRae police chief was absent from the locality. According to the office, he was on emergency leave. A series of administrative staff were either reassigned or on medical leave the same week. The intense, simultaneous upheavals made no one on the investigation team believe this was a mere coincidence. Cassandra sat at the table, flipping through partially recovered files. In another arrest 6 months prior, for the same non-cooperation reason, camera data was missing and reports were altered by the same admin account. The victim was a black bank employee arrested in his business attire. The case was quickly closed without prosecution, but he resigned shortly after, due to damage to reputation. She paused. The time frames overlapped in a pattern needing no guesswork. Each file was a slice, and the entire system's true form was gradually revealed. This was no clerical error. This was a quiet, organized plan, targeting not just her. McRae County was not alone in this behavior. She began to understand why she was brought here and why everything was so methodically executed. The issue was not one individual's fault, but the system's choice to rewrite the truth. The Central Archive Systems report was sent overnight. Cassandra held the thick document, dry numbers printed in columns on paper. The heading read, "Analysis of Civil Arrest Frequency at State-Level Districts, Grouped by Race and Reason for Arrest." The first line was chilling. Over 40 cases in 2 years, with the same accusation group, the same manipulation pattern, and the same report template seemingly pre-printed. 80% of those arrested were black. All cases cited identical reasons: non-cooperation, disturbance, resisting law enforcement. Each description was nearly a copy. Some phrases matched exactly down to line breaks. Vague accusations repeated, as if someone had drafted a template and the police's job was just to insert the new name. Cassandra folded the report and moved to the digital map on the wall. An assistant projected an interactive map highlighting in red the locations with unusually high arrest densities. McRae County was just one dot among many. When she requested to expand statewide, the map shifted to reveal 3 times as many red dots. Under each was a list of appointed public defenders, nearly half recurring across multiple cases and suspiciously financially connected to community development funds managed by local councils. The pieces began to fit. A smooth, quiet, but effective system. Arrest, charge, force signing reports, close files. No coercion, no public violence, all done through procedure, documentation, and legitimizing language. The arrested, like her, like dozens of others, did not realize they were part of a deliberate operational chain, not random victims. In a small back room, Cassandra met a familiar face. Malik Stroud, a man who had been detained in the isolation unit with her, was now released on bail posted by relatives. He sat leaning forward, hands on his knees, eyes darkened from sleepless nights. He recounted slowly every detail of his arrest night, the repeated questioning, the coaxing to sign for early release. Cassandra listened silently. When he stopped, she opened her laptop and placed the arrest report in front of him. The title, charge, reason, and behavior description identical to hers. Malik looked at the document, shook his head slightly, and exhaled deeply. "They use one version for all," he whispered. "They don't care who you are." Returning to the meeting room, Cassandra asked the team to compile more arrest maps statewide. When results appeared, about a dozen red dots stood out, each in a predominantly black neighborhood, each linked to police departments with murky disciplinary histories, all noting recurring assigned public defenders on cycles. She stared at the map, eyes unwavering. Each dot was an unspoken accusation, proof of an unannounced strategy, a system that needed no laws, only to convince people they were always the wrongdoers. Turning back to her desk, Cassandra opened her original report. She crossed out the line "victim of unlawful arrest" and wrote a new one, "key witness in a systematic manipulation targeting black communities." This was no longer just her story. It was a gateway, and she had stepped through, not to retreat, but to expose. Cassandra was transferred to the common area at the request of federal representatives to ensure the social reintegration process. It was a small change, but to her a valuable opportunity. No longer confined by cold concrete walls and flickering fluorescent lights in solitude, the common area was more open, allowing at least glimpses of faces beyond guards and sluggish cameras. There, she noticed an elderly black man sitting in a shadowed corner, almost motionless. His frame was thin and hunched forward, but his eyes were different, not drifting or resigned, but carrying a strange depth, as if he wasn't merely looking but memorizing everything. Inmates called him Old Joe, a name hovering between respect and disregard. No one knew what crime he had committed or how long he had been there. It was only known that no one bothered him, and he never joined any loud conversations in the common area. Staff avoided mentioning him, neither friendly nor rude. His presence made the surrounding space cautious. Cassandra observed him for days. Every time shifts changed, he quietly looked up at the ceiling, slowly folded books, changed seats, or walked at precise moments. She realized he had an intimate understanding of the system, the way cameras scanned in cycles, blind spots, when sounds were filtered. This was no ordinary inmate behavior. One afternoon, Cassandra deliberately sat near him. No one else approached. She placed her food tray down without a word. He ate spoonfuls of porridge slowly, as if nothing unusual was happening. "Who were you out there?" she asked directly. He paused for a few seconds and looked into her eyes for the first time. Those eyes, neither startled nor evasive, seemed to gauge her trustworthiness. "I was someone who understood the inside better than anyone out there," he replied, with a faint smile, almost imperceptible. Cassandra stayed silent, not asking more. That statement was enough to make her pause and think. There was something revealed in that voice, a memory trained through countless interrogations. This man had worked deep within the system. Their conversation was interrupted by distant footsteps. A guard came for a surprise check. Old Joe stood, abandoned his tray, nodded lightly to her, then quietly left. As he turned his back, Cassandra's gaze followed, sharper than before. In that brief moment, she was certain this was no forgotten man, but a hidden link, and now that link had just begun to reveal itself. In the following days, the distance between Cassandra and Joe gradually closed, like two lines destined to meet at a point. They exchanged a few words, but each time they sat near each other brought more understanding of each other's quiet existence. Joe habitually peeled fruit with a worn plastic spoon lid. His eyes always slowly scanned the surroundings as if every movement was being recorded in an unfailing memory. Once, while Cassandra was reading a bulletin on the notice board, Joe passed by without looking at her but casually said, "You hold your head up longer than I ever did." The comment was neither praise nor sarcasm. It was acknowledgement. She replied with a brief glance, accepting the recognition without response. On a rare afternoon when inmates were allowed outside, Cassandra sat under a shelter while Joe stayed close to a shadowed wall edge. He told her he had worked for an FBI internal investigation unit. He loved his job, but the price he paid was not in his salary. "I thought what I exposed would be protected," he said without heaviness, "until I realized the light had an owner." He didn't specify who put him here, but every word carried the weight of someone who had lived long enough to understand that truth was sometimes imprisoned even more tightly than criminals. Cassandra listened without interruption. When he mentioned unfamiliar names, he asked, "Do you know about regional intranets?" She nodded. He continued, "I remember old access codes, how routing was set, even the files I downloaded before my access was cut. There was no boastfulness. He spoke as one recounting planting a tree where no one cared, and now the tree still lived." That night, Cassandra shared with him for the first time. Short, clear, without embellishment. She spoke of her detention, the investigators' names, and why she had stayed silent from the start. Joe asked no questions. After a few seconds, he said, "Do you have a plan?" She didn't answer immediately, but her eyes changed. No longer just defensive, but accepting another person within her smallest circle. Afterward, Joe revealed details no one else dared mention. Real cameras clicked every 3 minutes during scans. Fake ones remained silent. Exit doors in Area C were welded shut, but hinges could be used if enough screws were removed. Old internal records were stored behind the equipment room. The entrance had been unlocked since the technician moved out last year. He gave no blueprints or emphasis, but each description added to Cassandra's grasp of a living map. The morning of his internal transfer order, Joe said nothing during the meal. He ate as usual, slightly hunched, revealing no signs of change. When he stood, he walked slowly toward Cassandra, stopping just close enough so others could not hear clearly. "Not enough people believed me before," he said, eyes fixed on the light at the corridor's end. "You do. Don't waste it." Cassandra nodded, no words, but at that moment the corner of her mouth lifted slightly, a nod from someone who understood that in a world of blinded people, patient observation was the only power never taken away, and sometimes the most dangerous weapon came from those forgotten. Darnell appeared on a Wednesday morning, the very day the prison announced an adjusted work schedule. He was transferred from the lower solitary confinement to Cassandra's section after a routine file review that no one bothered to explain. The man, in his 50s, moved slowly, with a darkened face and eyes that always seemed to look beyond the immediate distance. He had once worked in the FBI's Internal Communications Department. The name Darnell Mays quietly appeared in several suppressed reports. Convicted for unauthorized possession of classified documents, no evidence was ever publicly disclosed. From the first day Cassandra arrived in solitary confinement, he was the first to hand her a set of pristine stainless steel spoons, instead of the usual chipped ceramic ones issued to special watch prisoners. Their conversations were few, fragmented, brief, and indirect. But that day, while sweeping a side corridor together, Darnell paused mid-stroke and quietly asked, "Do you think they fear you because of your rank?" Cassandra said nothing. He continued, eyes fixed on the tiled floor. "They fear you because you haven't broken yet." At the end of cleaning, Darnell sat down on the floor, pretending to adjust his shoelaces. His fingers traced 3 small symbols on the ground before erasing them immediately. "Someone is watching you, not the guards," he said, softly enough to hear from inside. That night, Cassandra noticed 3 unfamiliar prisoners brought into the room adjacent to hers. They spoke little, silent, but their eyes never left her from the moment they arrived. During mealtime, one of them feigned dropping a food tray toward her, then laughed and muttered provocative words aimed at those who once wore uniforms and think they are superior. A voice half joking, half threatening, enough for Cassandra to understand this was no coincidence. The next morning, during labor group assignments, Darnell deliberately bumped hard into one of the 3. The knee strike was precise, yet just enough to pass as an accident. Then he walked past Cassandra, whispering, "Something's happening tonight. Stay away from the old corridor." That night, while Cassandra was writing, an unfamiliar guard knocked on her door, vaguely stating she needed to temporarily relocate for a technical inspection. Immediately, she sensed something was wrong. The sudden order came without confirmation paperwork or a second supervisor. When she asked for verification from the warden, the guard evaded and grew impatient. At that moment, Darnell appeared. Surprisingly calm, "I can go instead," he said. "My room is right next door. If they inspect the system, it should be the same." The guard looked at Cassandra, then Darnell, hesitated a few seconds, then nodded. Darnell passed by her, gave a slight nod, his eyes showing something like an unspoken pat on the shoulder. Cassandra stood silently, feeling something slipping out of control. He walked into the west corridor, where cameras rarely functioned properly. The iron door closed and locked. Cassandra was held back for a few more minutes, "for safety procedure," the guard said. In that strange, quiet moment, she heard the clatter of metal in the area where the switch happened. A short scream mixed with the sound of a heavy object falling. Then silence. She looked toward the dark end of the corridor where the noise came from, feeling as if she had just lost something she had not fully understood the value of. The news came early the next morning from a young guard, his face still hesitant and unmasked. He stood at the cell door, holding a clipboard, glanced through the mesh, then lowered his voice. Prisoner Darnell Mays was moved out last night. Severe injuries, condition unknown. Cassandra looked up, her eyes unblinking, asking no further questions. The guard paused, waiting for a reaction, then quickly turned away, as if eager to escape a room containing something uncomfortable. Cassandra did not rise immediately. She sat upright on the bed, hands resting on her knees, eyes fixed on the closed door. A gap opened inside her chest, tightening painfully. Darnell had gone down the corridor in her place. Those steps should have been hers. The clang of metal from last night echoed in her mind, pounding her chest in silence. She refused to interpret. him should have been the one lying there, she thought, folding her hands over her chest as if checking her pulse. But her hands remained steady. She did not allow them to tremble. Later that morning, a low-level manager, known to be neutral within the prison, passed by her room and slipped a carefully folded small paper under the door. No name, no sign. Inside were only 2 handwritten lines. "Don't stop. They fear you because you are still alive." The last sentence trembled slightly, the ink slanting left, as if written with a weakening hand. In the afternoon, Cassandra requested to change her bed linens. When removing the thin mattress cover, she found a paper edge sewn under the fabric, a hastily but firmly stitched gray thread. She pulled the layer aside, retrieving a worn, neatly handwritten letter folded in thirds. It was Darnell's handwriting. In the letter, he listed 3 locations, 1 in another state, 2 within a 40-mile radius of McRae County. Alongside was a brief explanation. Those were places that once stored original data copies that he and a colleague had discovered relating to a series of incidents involving erased records and fabricated evidence by local police. No originals remained, but there might be transcripts or recovered data. Cassandra folded the paper again, tracing a vertical line along the edge as if sealing a will. She placed it in her palm, held it for a few seconds, then bent down and hid it deep beneath her shoe lining. There was no time to grieve, no right to be weak. She sat back on the bed, the light from the ventilation grate casting a diagonal streak across the floor and her feet. In that light, Cassandra took a deep breath and looked up at the ceiling, not to hope, but to steady herself. This was no longer a personal battle. Darnell had entrusted her with a part of himself, and it was not an escape, it was a transfer, authorization, the final trust. She stood up and walked to the corner of the room, where a fake camera hung silently. Looking up at the blank plastic lens, Cassandra whispered just enough for herself to hear. "Now, it's my turn to do his part." The scene unfolded so quickly that it felt as if everything shattered in a single breath. Cassandra was stepping out of the interrogation room when a masked prisoner suddenly charged from a shadowed corner of the hallway, wielding a sharp object concealed in his sleeve. The move was so fast that the nearby guard could not react in time. In that instant, the silent cellmate who had sat quietly beside Cassandra for days, a weary, taciturn black man, leapt forward to shield her. The stab struck his chest. Blood splattered as Cassandra stood motionless while his body collapsed right before her. The pain came not only from witnessing a life slip away, but from the relentless torment of knowing he had sacrificed himself to protect her without a single word. Cassandra bent down, clutching the blood-soaked body, feeling the weakening heartbeat. His eyes gazed at her calmly, as if he had foreseen this moment. This was not just prison violence. It was a deliberate strike and a warning. Deep inside, a silent alarm rang for Cassandra. That very night, she was transferred temporarily for security reasons. Instead of calming, suspicion grew. She recalled that the attacker was not from the monitored prisoner group, but a newcomer with no notable record. His ability to reach the area she was passing through precisely when a guard had left his post could not be a coincidence. A series of small details began to piece together in her mind like hidden links in a chain. The next morning, Cassandra called Marcus Langston. Though lacking concrete proof, she stated bluntly, "I believe the attack was no accident." Marcus was silent for a moment, then responded briefly, "I'm starting to think so too." Inside the prison, 2 close cellmates who had spoken with the victim shared odd conversations he had. He had said, "This must end," that he was too tired of these staged verdicts. One recalled a few days prior, a stranger in a prison uniform had entered his cell, after which he fell silent. Cassandra started questioning the real mastermind, someone with the authority to alter records, move prisoners, and coordinate shifts. One guard who had scheduled prisoner movements on the attack day suddenly took extended leave, a minor yet suspicious detail. She forwarded these findings to Marcus, requesting a thorough check on the attacker's identity, admission process, and prior contacts. The result revealed that the attacker used fake documents, fingerprints absent from the system, and no one could confirm he was truly arrested from outside. The truth began to emerge. The attack and her cellmate's death were purposeful moves. The goal was not only to physically disable Cassandra, but also to break her psychologically and stir public opinion that violence erupted because of her presence, that she caused chaos inside the prison. She realized she was caught in a larger chess game where every step had been calculated. But Cassandra did not falter. That loss reignited within her a fiercer determination than ever. The man who died protecting her would not become a pawn in their dirty game. "I will expose them all," she told Marcus in their next contact. The counterattack plan started with uncovering links between the attacker and prison officials, reports, mismatched shifts, surveillance lapses at critical moments. All were in her hands. She no longer sought just to protect herself, but to change the rules. And this time, she would not stand alone. Before the shock of the prison death had faded, Cassandra was pulled into a new legal whirlwind. Media amplified the incident not as a targeted attack, but as a direct consequence of her overwhelming presence and influence. Those pulling the strings exploited the sensitive moment to put her on the defensive, beginning with a series of harsh headlines such as "Female General Stirring Trouble at Federal Prison" or "Whose Power is Shielding the Violence." A group of local prosecutors filed motions to reopen investigations into the chain of events from Cassandra's arrest to the homicide. Vague charges like disturbing order and inciting violence in custody were fabricated and stuffed into a petition seeking her temporary suspension during the inquiry. While the Department of Defense quietly defended her, internal divisions surfaced. Some senior officers expressed doubt, suggesting her toughness damaged the organization's image. Cassandra understood what was happening, but feeling cautiousness from former allies was another blow to her faith. She had believed truth would be enough to protect her, but now realized it required something else: strength, strategy. The media relentlessly cast her as the troublemaker, labeling her the female general wielding power. Former supporters remained silent. Pressure mounted daily as nightly news showed her face, accompanied by captions like, "Is she worthy of the highest rank?" In the small room allocated for her within the protective unit, Cassandra stared at the light filtering through the window. Her mind swirled between anger and exhaustion. What was lost? The cellmate, the faith in the system she once served, pressed heavily on her chest. Yet amid that silence, something else began to rise. The will to survive, the will to win. She would not retreat, nor allow a trap to erase everything. Marcus Langston acted first. Along with a team of lawyers and independent investigators, he began tracing activities linked to the attack. Prison data was reviewed minute by minute. Cameras, logs, shift records. An old administrative recorder revealed a suspicious conversation about arranging movement paths off camera for an important figure. Simultaneously, Marcus received information from an anonymous whistleblower that prosecutors were manipulating evidence and concealing key facts related to the attacker's identity. They were rewriting the story to paint Cassandra as a disruptive influence, causing disorder in a highly controlled environment. Amidst the chaos, Cassandra hand-wrote a statement and sent it to the press. "I will not defend the truth because it needs no defense. I will confront it." A single sentence, yet enough to shake those scheming in the shadow. All eyes now turned to the upcoming hearing, where real evidence would be publicly revealed for the first time. Cassandra stood before the greatest legal battle of her life, with no choice but to face it head-on. And this time, she was no longer fighting just for herself. She represented those who had never had the chance to step beyond those concrete walls. During the days leading up to the hearing, Cassandra often woke in the middle of the night with a feeling that something was still missing. Fragmented memories from the detention center began to surface, among which the image of an elderly black man persistently appeared. He said nothing, drew no attention, but his gaze, silent, calm, and full of scrutiny, remained vivid in her mind. While others were in chaos over the attack, he sat quietly on the edge of his bed, as if waiting for something to happen exactly as it should. Cassandra asked her legal team to review the list of inmates at that time. One name appeared: Langston Marcus. The notes were locked, and marked Internal Access Restricted. This anomaly caught her attention. A detention file that required approval from the detention center's command to unlock was clearly no ordinary record. Through a call to an old acquaintance in the Department of Defense, Cassandra confirmed his true identity. Marcus Langston was a former senior FBI agent specializing in investigating abuses of power and racial discrimination within county police systems. Over 10 years ago, he abruptly resigned after an investigation into McRibe was suddenly shut down. No one knew where he went, and no one sought to ask. Now he had reappeared, coinciding with Cassandra's own descent into a similar spiral. Cassandra found clues leading to Marcus's new residence, an old warehouse on the outskirts of town, refurbished as both living quarters and document storage. Upon arrival, the door was ajar. Weak light from a yellowed ceiling lamp illuminated towering piles of files. Marcus sat at a desk, holding a yellowed notebook. He did not look up as Cassandra entered, as if he had expected her. His first words were not a greeting, but a dry statement. "Do you think you're any different from those they've drowned before?" Cassandra stood still for a moment before replying, "I know I'm not the first, but I want to be the last they can deceive." Those words made Marcus close the notebook and study her carefully. Their conversation began tense, to people once discarded by the system while trying to fight against it. Marcus explained why he had withdrawn. The case he had investigated in McRabe years ago was closed before prosecution could proceed. A series of evidence was removed from archives, witnesses disappeared, and officers he monitored were promoted. After being forced out, he vanished from the federal network, living like a ghost but persistently gathering information, documenting every clue, as one haunted by a justice distorted. Cassandra recounted her recent experiences. From arrest to sacrifice, she witnessed firsthand. When she mentioned the deleted clip, Marcus furrowed his brow for the first time. He stood and walked to a bookshelf behind him, pulling out a dossier wrapped carefully in canvas. "I can't change the past," he said, "but if you really want to break this cycle, now is the time." There was no handshake, no smile, just a recognition between two who understood that ahead lay a swamp but no reason to turn back. For the first time since everything began, Cassandra felt she had a true ally, not a savior, but someone who had survived exactly what she faced. Marcus did not promise help, but as he pushed the dossier toward her, his look said clearly, "I've waited too long for someone like you." Marcus opened the back door of the bookshelf, revealing a dim, small room filled with carefully numbered boxes. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of old paper and rusted metal. A ceiling fan spun slowly overhead, yellow light casting shadows on cold steel shelves, where files were stacked like evidence of an unannounced war. He took a small key from his belt and unlocked a separate metal cabinet. When the door opened, Cassandra saw dozens of sealed hard drives, USB sticks, and backup copies of files in two formats, paper and encrypted digital. "I used to call this the graveyard of what should never have been buried," Marcus said, running his hand over thick documents. Each cover bore county names, incident dates, and a red file closed stamp. Some cases had never been publicized. Others had briefly appeared in the media before disappearing without a trace. He pulled out a thinner folder kept in a leather envelope and placed it on the table in front of Cassandra. "This is what you need," he said briefly. Opening it, she found an excerpt from the internal archive, a body cam video less than a minute long, marked "Before the camera lost signal." In the clip, Ryan Caldwell appeared clearly, speaking quietly but sharply to another officer. "I'll handle this one. These smart-ass black folks need to be taught a lesson." Next was footage of him approaching Cassandra, signaling a colleague to mute their mic, then deliberately pulling her out of direct camera view. The clip ended with Cassandra's silhouette staggering after a hard blow from behind, exactly when the system reported a technical error. Cassandra gripped the screen tightly, her heart pounding as the clip ended. Though brief, it was enough to shatter the entire fabricated narrative built by their opponents. Marcus spread a map across the table and pointed to red-marked spots. This is the connection map. Caldwell doesn't act alone. This is the chain linking police chiefs, prosecutors, judges, all connected through unusual arrests targeting educated black individuals approaching positions of influence. Each point on the map came with files, evidence, and documents gathered over the years. There were internal dialogues, altered verdicts, and invalid arrest warrants. Marcus silently kept them day after day, month after month, waiting for the moment someone strong enough would use them. Cassandra sat quietly. Before her was not just a series of events, it was an entire system, a silent mechanism built over generations. She looked back at the dossier, then at Marcus. "This is no longer about me," she said. Marcus nodded. "You have two choices. One is to escape. The other is to tear it down." Cassandra's eyes hardened. She clenched the dossier and stood, her voice steel-ground. "I choose to overthrow it." Marcus smiled lightly, the first since they met. He stood and opened another drawer filled with black hard drives. "Then let's begin." In that moment, Cassandra was no longer alone before the court. She was the spearhead, daring to step into the forbidden zone where men like Marcus had once been pushed out. This time, she would go all the way. As the pieces of the puzzle became clear in their hands, Marcus and Cassandra reached a consensus. This was no longer about a single wronged individual, but a rotten system that needed to be dismantled from the root. Cassandra's arrest was only the tip of the iceberg. Underneath lay a network of fabricated cases, manipulated testimonies, and a mechanism that legalized oppression through legal procedures. Their first target was to fully reconstruct the chain of evidence in Cassandra's own case, beginning with the deleted body cam footage and system logs related to server access during the week of her arrest. Marcus contacted an old friend who had worked at the Federal Records Archive and had secretly copied data before all access was restricted. He sent Marcus detailed printouts showing the exact time Caldwell ordered the urgent deletion of the video data, accompanied by documents proving the request was made without supervisory authorization. Meanwhile, a cybersecurity technician who had helped Marcus intercept data in the past decrypted the system logs, pinpointing who accessed the server, when, and from where. The IP trace clearly showed connections from the McRae County Prosecutor's Office. At the same time, Cassandra met Olivia Stroud, a former journalist who had investigated coercive interrogations of black suspects in McRae, but lost her press credentials before her report could be published. Now, working freelance and living simply, Olivia still kept all the materials and notes from her halted series. When Cassandra arrived, Olivia opened a small safe and pulled out black and white photos of internal documents and charts, analyzing the relationships among powerful figures in the law enforcement system. Caldwell's name appeared, linking to a series of prosecutors and judges involved in similar cases. With the reinforced data, Cassandra shifted focus to meeting victims who had been convicted in these irregular trials. They were once promising individuals, students, small business owners, and community activists, forced to plead guilty after evidence had been tampered with. They lost everything. Initially, they refused to talk, their eyes wary and voices firm. But when Cassandra presented archival images and previously concealed documents, their caution turned to astonishment. One man, coerced into pleading guilty to drug possession, whispered, "These are records I've never seen in court." Marcus reorganized the archives, overlapping cases and noticing a recurring pattern. Identical emergency detentions, the same group of officers, the same prosecutors pushing for plea deals before trials. A witness from a 2012 case unexpectedly confirmed seeing Caldwell at a private interrogation, even though his name was absent from the official record. The story deepened when several victims said the person forcing them to sign confessions was an unnamed officer in uniform but never identifying rank. Cassandra began feeling watched. A strange car appeared repeatedly near her workplace, and unknown callers rang the legal office but hung up after hearing her voice. Marcus reported that a key intermediary, once working in the prosecutor's office and potentially a crucial witness, had vanished from his residence 3 days earlier. His belongings were untouched, phone off, and no one knew his whereabouts. Both Marcus and Cassandra understood they were touching the core of a system that knew how to protect itself at all costs. But that did not stop them. On the contrary, the growing danger only strengthened their resolve that this time, if they went deep enough, they would not return empty-handed. Inside a room lit by yellow light reflecting on worn pages, Cassandra sat opposite Marcus with 2 cups of cold coffee between them. Before them lay hundreds of pages of files, connection maps, analytical charts, and short videos powerful enough to explode McRob's entire judicial system. The question was no longer whether to expose it, but how to do so without falling into political traps or media manipulation. Marcus flipped a page and spoke softly. If we reveal everything before the hearing, they will block it with an emergency court order, divert the media, and distort our intentions. They hold executive power, and they will use it. Cassandra did not object, knowing that well. But she replied with an unusually calm voice, "If we wait for due process, everything will be buried again. They erased once, they can do it again." A silent agreement followed. They needed 2 approaches. 1, a proper legal process. 2, an uncontrollable public narrative. Marcus proposed a strategic release through an independent press group previously excluded from mainstream media. He contacted 3 journalists who had been forced out after touching internal police files, now writing on independent platforms or working for non-profit investigative organizations. They were granted access to part of the documents, mainly the body cam videos and power connection charts. Each signed a strict confidentiality agreement until Cassandra and the legal team gave the signal. One female reporter, once threatened with death for exposing wrongful convictions, looked at the files and said to Marcus, "I've waited for this moment for 10 years. Meanwhile, Cassandra's lawyers finalized civil lawsuit files and criminal complaints against the involved officers and prosecutors. They analyzed the entire chain of wrongdoing, altered reports, destroyed evidence, coerced confessions, media manipulation. The plan was scheduled down to the hour. As the media broke the news, the lawsuit would be filed in federal court, with copies sent directly to the Department of Justice's Office of the Inspector General. For the first time in this journey, Cassandra saw the turning point clearly. No more running, no more defense. This was organized offense. Every action, every printout became a bullet piercing the decaying power structure. She was the leader, but also a link in an awakening network. Marcus pulled from his desk drawer a separate file, much older than anything Cassandra had seen. The cover simply read, "McRab 2009. He placed it on the table between them, looking at her as if entrusting a responsibility. "This case is the root. The first I was forced to stop. If we expose it, the whole domino chain will fall." Cassandra turned the first page, her eyes unwavering. "This time, I don't need anyone's permission." The date and location were set and kept secret. Every document and data transmission had backup plans. There was no turning back. The door they were opening would never close again, and once fully open, those hidden behind uniforms and gavels would be forced into the light for the first time. The meeting took place in a dimly lit room behind the McRab police headquarters, where the yellow light cast a somber tone over every cold face. On the table lay a series of classified documents, investigation files, personnel lists, secretly taken photos, and copies of content extracted illegally from phones, all neatly arranged. Lieutenant Garland, one of the county's political operatives, folded his arms and spoke in a deep voice. "Cassandra Moore is pushing things too far." A gray-hailed man in a gray suit, representing the local conservative alliance, nodded and responded sharply, "If she wins, all of us will pay the price." The atmosphere was no longer about discussion. It had turned into a conspiracy. They knew what Cassandra and Marcus held could topple numerous figures behind local power networks. None of them were willing to lose control. The plan was set that very night, to use friendly media channels to release articles questioning Cassandra's personal motives, twisting her military past, and fabricating political ties between Marcus and anti-government groups. Meanwhile, Cassandra and Marcus were exchanging information in a secure office of the Department of Defense, where classified data from internal servers was recovered and analyzed. On the screen, snippets of emails, edited videos, and text messages appeared as links, forming a complete picture. Marcus pointed at a recording, the voice of a state police leader admitting to fabricating evidence to suppress civil rights lawsuit. Cassandra did not blink, her hands clenched tightly. She was no longer surprised, only cold silence layered over a resolve to act. Another data chart appeared, revealing many past cases had a common thread. All were swiftly closed for administrative reasons, never fully investigated. Some people had committed suicide, others vanished from residency records, and a few were forced out of the state under suspicious conditions. "We've stepped onto a nameless battlefield," Marcus quietly said. Cassandra nodded without looking away from the screen. "The time for silence is over." A plan for a truth disclosure event took shape overnight. They decided not to release all the data at once, but split it into 3 waves, each a strategic strike, targeting the core of power manipulation groups. Marcus took charge of technical and logistical support, while Cassandra directly coordinated content and public statements. They anticipated fierce backlash, from manipulated mainstream media to covert personal threats. On the first day, several independent news outlets began publishing information. The first article, titled "The Woman Who Commands Thousands, Now Accused of Power Abuse," spread quickly online. Some commentators started questioning whether Cassandra was using military influence to manipulate justice. Meanwhile, a major alternative news site openly cited evidence provided by Marcus with the statement "systemic truth" and its leaking drop by drop. On social media, debates flared sharply, splitting into 2 clear camps. One accused Cassandra of being a political tool. The other insisted she was a victim, daring to oppose a rotten system. She read every comment silently, not responding, but noting important names and questions that could become clues. She didn't need everyone to believe her, just enough to listen. And the first spark was ignited. In the second-floor office of the McCrabb police station, an internal meeting unfolded under cold lighting. Ryan Caldwell stood at the head of the table, hands pressed on the smooth wood, voice tense. "If we let her continue, dozens of us will be exposed." A seasoned officer seated to the right stubbed out a cigarette, eyes wavering. "But if we react wrongly, the whole system will explode. We have enough reasons to be cautious." The exchanged looks conveyed a silent understanding. Unity was fracturing. Within this shadow of power, personal interests were the only thing holding them together. A deputy director, silent until now, suddenly accused Ryan of handling several critical files unilaterally, endangering the group. Anger flashed in Ryan's eyes, then quickly was suppressed. "Don't forget," he said, "the first to be put on trial will be the weakest." The meeting ended without handshakes, only wariness lingering in every departing step. The next day, Cassandra received news that some of her personal data had been leaked on an extremist forum. Images from her military past, private letters, and a manipulated message clip with clear intent were exposed. Marcus traced the related IP address to a server located in a nearby city hall, but the tracing was abruptly cut off by an unusual law enforcement block. Every step forward now came with shadows watching, every contact possibly a broken link. The press began publishing guided articles. A former teammate was vaguely quoted criticizing Cassandra's stubborn, inflexible attitude during an overseas campaign. An old clip was blurred, voice faked, tarnishing Marcus's honor. Yet some independent media still released unedited evidence that Marcus had extracted from original sources. Both sides fought fiercely over every piece of information. At a special civil court hearing, the large hall fell silent as Cassandra took the stand. Light shone directly on her shoulder, where her general's badge remained quietly gleaming. Opposite her sat Ryan Caldwell, with legal representatives and several officers in the front row. The atmosphere was thick enough to suffocate every sound. Someone in the press muttered, "Cameras flashed repeatedly." "This is the original unedited video," Marcus stated firmly. Body cam footage played on the large screen behind, exposing every action and hateful glance clearly. Some in the audience gasped. Near Ryan, an associate looked at him skeptically. Another crack appeared in their unity. Though some tried to cause disruptions, shouting during the hearing, security intervened swiftly. Cassandra did not retreat. She walked confidently through each argument and piece of evidence. She did not justify, but led with the truth. Pieces of the conspiracy gradually fell into place. At the end, a representative from the Internal Oversight Office addressed the press. "We will expand the investigation." A brief statement, but the reaction from Ryan and his conservative allies was seismic. Some of his allies began distancing themselves, even cutting off contact. After leaving the court, Cassandra made no statements. She looked toward Marcus. Both understood the battle was far from over, but for the first time, the balance of power had shifted. On social media, people began sharing excerpts from the hearing, no longer arguing, but listening. And that listening began to take the shape of trust. The federal courthouse, located in the state capitol, was chosen as the venue for the hearing. Outside the building, hundreds gathered, carrying banners and photos of victims who had suffered under the McRae system. Multiple layers of security fences were erected, with each person thoroughly checked before entering the hall. Amid the heavy tension in the air, well-dressed reporters whispered among themselves as cameras focused on the witness table, where Cassandra Moore had already taken her seat. She sat beside Marcus Langston, her eyes fixed straight ahead, her face sharp but far from cold. To her left was the special federal prosecutor assigned to the case, a middle-aged woman with short hair, silver-rimmed glasses, and a voice sharp as a blade from previous internal meetings. To her right, behind the defense lawyers, sat the representatives of McRae Law Enforcement, dressed uniformly with dark blue ties, their eyes shifting more towards each other than toward Cassandra. Ryan Caldwell sat alone in a corner, expressionless, his collar tight. Under the courtroom lights, he no longer carried the arrogance he once had. Beside him were two political advisors, formerly part of the local conservative group, now acting as trial overseers. Yet their eyes constantly scanned the reactions of the public and scattered state delegates in the room. As the hearing officially began, jury members entered, each carefully selected based on background, race, and residence. Diversity was emphasized to foster trust that this was not an internally manipulated trial. The prosecutor rose and spoke briefly, her voice steady and sharp. "This is a federal hearing with significance beyond the individual. We are not merely seeking truth for one person, but for an entire community long silenced by a decayed system." She outlined a pattern of abuse of power, case manipulation, coerced confessions, and systematic evidence destruction, spanning more than a decade. Some in the audience nodded to each fact. Others took extensive notes. The defense quickly rebutted with a lengthy statement insisting all actions followed proper procedures. They emphasized Cassandra's case as isolated and biased, and suggested the accusations stemmed from emotion and political calculation. Cassandra's name was called. She rose confidently to the witness stand, eyes unwavering. The light shone on her plain military uniform, prompting many to recognize her as a former elite unit leader, not a defeated victim. She began recounting each step, being stopped, insulted, handcuffed, detained, coerced to confess, and evidence erased. With no excess words, she showed no anger or complaint. Her answers struck directly at the core, leaving little room for interruption. The defense lawyer deliberately pressed on her military rank, questioning whether Cassandra used her status to influence. She responded firmly, her gaze steady. "If I had influence, I would have used it to protect others, not wait until I was handcuffed to react." The courtroom paused briefly, some heads lifted from phones, focusing on her. Outside the hall, social media platforms were updated minute by minute. A hashtag bearing Cassandra's name flooded posts. Mainstream media remained cautious with brief reports, but numerous independent channels live-streamed peaceful protests outside the courthouse. They did not tell the story of a female general, but of a symbol. Public opinion began to shift, from doubt to sharing, encouragement, and pleas. "Keep going. Don't stop." Inside the hearing room, Cassandra understood the fight was no longer hers alone. Courtroom lighting adjusted as the prosecutor signaled technical staff to play body cam footage. On the large screen at center stage, first-person view from an officer's shoulder appeared, unedited and uninterrupted. Cassandra appeared in frame, hands on the wheel, speaking calmly, each word following protocol. Then a man's voice snarled racial slurs laced with mockery and insult. One officer laughed loudly before the sound of handcuffs clinking amid blatant threats. The room fell silent. Chairs shifted quietly. Some audience members gripped armrests tightly. Words once denied and explained away with excuses now emerged as undeniable. Cassandra remained still, never turning her head, eyes fixed on the screen, as if forcing all to witness the distorted truth. Marcus stepped forward, requesting permission for additional witnesses. An older man, tall with dark skin, approached the stand. Introducing himself as Samuel Trent, a former FBI special agent who served nearly 20 years in internal investigations, he revealed he had quietly monitored irregular activities at McRobb. His reports had been inexplicably halted, and he was reassigned shortly after proposing an expanded inquiry. During his brief detention for disobeying orders, he met Cassandra before her identity was known. He realized she was the next victim of the abuse pattern that once drove him away. He presented documents, including internal letters, a copy of a never-publicized investigation order, and recorded oral directives to prioritize closing cases. Some jurors bent over, taking copious notes. No one from the defense interrupted or dared to object immediately. Marcus continued, revealing a list of over 60 cases within 12 years, mostly involving people of color, immigrants, or marginalized groups. These cases ended with signed confession records, lacking legal counsel or complete audio recordings. Among these, 3 individuals had died in detention from alleged suicides, despite their families filing at least 5 pleas for help. An independent female journalist in the press gallery broke down in tears, trembling as she held up an old photo and asked quietly, "Victim number 43? Is that my brother?" Marcus paused briefly before nodding. Those around her rose, some holding hands, others bowing their heads, eyes moist. The story had moved beyond argument. It was about human lives revealed. Outside, megaphones blared. A peaceful protest held photos of the victims high. Handwritten signs, reading "Justice for McRabe," flooded the courthouse front. Live broadcasts interrupted regular programming with breaking news. Major channels that once maintained neutrality now aired full coverage of the hearing. Back in the courtroom, Ryan Caldwell was called to respond. He stood abruptly, his voice harsh, interrupting the prosecutor, arguing about the biased nature of the video and illegality of the federal recording. The judge warned him to maintain order and urged the legal team to restrain their client. Yet cracks showed clearly. One legal advisor, besides Ryan, left his seat, approached the Oversight Council, and handed over a sealed envelope. The atmosphere froze. Everyone understood this was the first fracture. The hearing did not end with a gavel, but with a silent movement. The opposition did not collapse suddenly, but quietly unraveled, piece by piece, before the nation's eyes. At the center of all attention, Cassandra remained upright, her gaze fixed unwaveringly on the screen, displaying truths hidden for a decade. That morning, Cassandra stepped out of her apartment, still holding a printed copy of notes prepared for the upcoming hearing. A letter was taped to her door, completely sealed, with no sender indicated. When she opened it, she found a photo taken of the very building where she lived, shot from a high and exaggerated angle, obviously with a professional lens. On the back, a single sentence was written in blurred black ink, uppercase letters. "Every door opens when one wants it to disappear." Marcus called her a few minutes later. His voice was urgent and direct, no beating around the bush. The security system of the server where their backup files were stored had been illegally accessed. The traces showed data being rerouted through a relay station at the county's IT department. They had not recovered anything yet, but clearly someone was tracking their trail, this time not to threaten, but to erase everything completely. As she left the courthouse, Cassandra glanced through the rearview mirror and spotted an unmarked black SUV, changing lanes every time she turned. At a red light, the vehicle pulled up close to her left side. The driver wore a baseball cap, facing outward, deliberately showing the tattoo on his neck that read, "For the Order." She didn't react or take another turn, but drove straight to the underground parking of the federal government building, knowing the cameras would record every move. That night, the fire alarm in the apartment suddenly blared, causing residents to rush down the emergency emergency stairs, but when firefighters arrived, they found no smoke or signs of fire. Returning home, Cassandra realized the hallway cameras had been disabled 10 minutes before the alarm sounded. No one spoke, but everyone in the building looked at her as if she were the cause. A message came from a military internal number, encrypted using an old security protocol. There are those who want you to disappear. Don't trust what seems legal. The message was unsigned and gave no further information. Shortly after, a representative from the Department of Justice suggested she temporarily move to a special residence for high-level witnesses, not mandatory but presented as a necessary precaution. At the same time, Marcus faced trouble with his family. His daughter was followed by a strange car after school. His ex-wife called angrily, demanding he cut all ties to the investigation. Marcus did not argue, only said he would ensure her safety. A reporter who had accompanied Cassandra during the initial series of articles was suddenly fired without reason. Their email was deleted and their phone was disconnected within hours. In the media, previously neutral newspapers began publishing pieces attacking Cassandra personally. Several videos from her military service were edited maliciously to defame her character and old tactical decisions. Political allies and activists who once openly supported her started withdrawing, citing reasons of not wanting to get too involved. The atmosphere within the support group also shifted. Marcus suspected a media member had leaked early data copies to a third party, obstructing investigations. A key technology expert withdrew, fearing for her child's safety. Cassandra sat in the meeting room under white lights, looking at every face. Everyone was silent. Each had their reasons, but no one was certain about anything anymore. The fight was no longer confined to the courtroom. It seeped into phones, into the eyes of loved ones, into every step taken outside the door. And Cassandra understood clearly. This time, they were targeting everything that kept her herself. Inside the apartment with drawn curtains, Cassandra sat blankly at her desk. Documents lay scattered, piled like memories that didn't quite fit together. Under her hand was an old photo of a young man, smiling, wearing a light gray uniform dusted with desert sand. He had died on his first mission in a nameless village where Cassandra commanded the unit at 28. That day, she had ordered a rear guard. He had volunteered to swap positions to save a lost child, and when the explosion echoed, Cassandra understood what irreversible loss meant. That moment changed her, making her realize some things don't belong to glory, but responsibility. The doorbell rang. Marcus entered, his coat still dusted by the wind, placed a file on the table and sat opposite her, eyes never leaving Cassandra. "I have read your manuscript. It's enough to end a generation of commanders," he said slowly and briefly. "But I'm not sure it's worth paying with your life." He didn't say it to scare her. He had seen similar things happen. People going too far, rushing headlong into justice, until forgetting how to turn back. Fighting doesn't mean burning yourself down. Cassandra was silent for a while. Her hand touched a photo of a brown-skinned girl, handcuffed behind her back, face terrified in a hallway camera snapshot. The 13-year-old was charged with resisting arrest for screaming when she saw her mother being beaten. Cassandra put the photo into a drawer, said nothing to Marcus, but her eyes said enough. The next morning, an elderly woman appeared at the door. She didn't give her name or stay long, only leaving a handwritten letter. It briefly recounted how she was once wrongfully imprisoned for picking up food in a market, forced to confess to theft. Her young daughter had to stay in a shelter for nearly a year. "I no longer hope anyone will help, but when I saw you, I knew there are still people who move forward, instead of turning away like we did." The last sentence was smudged. "You might be the first not to turn back." Marcus no longer mentioned retreat. He simply handed Cassandra a special delivery package with no sender. Inside was an old photo taken during the campaign in Dera years ago. Cassandra stood amid the unit, one arm wrapped in white bandages. Beneath the photo was a handwritten line. "We survived because of you. Now it's your turn to survive for yourself." At the same time, a group of veterans contacted the legal office, offering to help protect Cassandra in upcoming hearings. At the same time, a group of veterans contacted the legal office, offering to help protect Cassandra in upcoming hearings. They made no demands and required no titles. They just asked to stand on her side. Without notice, Cassandra sent a 36-page internal report to the Department of Justice. It included names of undisclosed witnesses, backup audio recordings, and financial diagrams of two obscure funds operated under charitable organization names. She did not share it with her advisory group or Marcus. Every step she took now required absolute silence. She began contacting families of certain witnesses, arranging travel schedules, hiring private lawyers, and organizing discreet protections for both victims and witnesses when they had yet to accept revealing themselves. As night fell, Cassandra stood before the mirror. She removed her badge from her chest and placed it on the table, its metallic gleam fading under the yellow light. After a moment, she picked it up and pinned it back on, this time with both hands. In the mirror, her eyes no longer glowed red. No anger, no fear, no trembling, only a cold, silent gaze remained. She said nothing and needed no words because now the only thing left was action. The hearing took place in an atmosphere of extreme tension. All eyes focused on Cassandra and Marcus as they took the witness stand, carrying the weight of the truth they had painstakingly gathered. Marcus began presenting with a confident and coherent voice, detailing every document in the file and every classified piece of evidence, clearly and convincingly. Odessa remained fiercely. Notably, he skillfully referenced the deliberately deleted body cam footage by comparing backup copies, gradually undermining the defense arguments of the McGrath police. Each piece of evidence was like a solid brick building an undeniable picture of the truth, leaving the courtroom breathlessly silent. Beside Marcus, Cassandra radiated unwavering determination. She spoke confidently, each word a sharp arrow, directly refuting the accusations of abuse of power. Beyond explaining her actions clearly, she tactfully steered the narrative toward the noble purpose of protecting justice and giving voice to oppressed communities. Cassandra's decisive and unhesitating responses earned recognition from everyone present as a testament to the maturity and strength forged through months of hard struggle. She was not just a female commander, but a symbol of resilience and living justice. Outside the courtroom, public reaction intensified. On social media, support for Cassandra and Marcus spread like an unstoppable wildfire. The image of the proud female commander and the story of injustice evoked deep empathy, drawing widespread public attention. The media shifted from skepticism to support, continuously reporting and analyzing the case. Civil rights organizations and military forces voiced solidarity with Cassandra, applying strong political pressure on local officials who had been trying to cover up the truth. Thanks to public pressure and convincing evidence, the judge decided to expand the investigation, ordering a comprehensive review of the McRae police's misconduct. This decision marked a crucial turning point in the case and opened hope for a profound legal revolution, paving the way for subsequent actions to thoroughly address the injustices. It was an initial victory, opening the door to justice, despite the long road and many challenges ahead. Cassandra and Marcus viewed this win as a starting point, a small light in the long journey ahead. They understood that justice had not yet been fully served, but steadfast spirit, unity, and relentless will to fight would be the keys to unlocking the next doors. This turning point was not merely a personal achievement, but a beacon of hope for the community, a declaration that truth would ultimately be revealed and justice would prevail. The trial of the accused police officers opened with intense public and media attention. Charges included abuse of power, racial discrimination, evidence tampering, and false accusations, creating a gravity in the courtroom unlike any before. Ryan Caldwell and his accomplices faced heavy pressure from irrefutable evidence gathered by Cassandra and Marcus's legal team, placing them at risk of severe legal consequences. The investigation proceeded methodically and thoroughly, relying on testimonies from key witnesses, extracted classified files, and verification of deleted videos to prove manipulation and concealment of the truth. Cassandra and Marcus's lawyers constructed sharp, coherent, and compelling arguments, refuting each defense claim. Every piece of evidence contributed to dismantling the defense's case, exposing the police officers' weakness in the legal battle. The accused officers attempted to deny guilt and blame each other, but their morale and reputations inevitably collapsed. Every denial was shattered under the weight of evidence and strict community oversight. Their previously respected status in the police force was increasingly eroded, reflecting the severity of the case and the negative impact on the law enforcement's image. The trial became a symbol of the fight against racial discrimination within the police force, drawing close attention from the community and media. Social organizations strongly campaigned for reform and tighter police oversight, seeking deep systemic changes. Growing social pressure created favorable conditions for legal and political progress. Preliminary results of the trial showed several officers suspended and criminally charged, with Ryan Caldwell facing the harshest penalties. Local officials also began investigations into their responsibilities, opening a new chapter in addressing systemic misconduct. This decision was not just individual punishment, but a warning to the entire police force, emphasizing the importance of accountability and transparency. Amid these developments, Cassandra expressed happiness but remained cautious. She was fully aware this was only the beginning, with many challenges and work ahead to ensure justice was truly served. She prepared for upcoming legal battles while planning activities to promote deeper systemic reforms toward a fairer and more equal future for the community she represented. After the landmark trial, a powerful wave of change spread through the local community and neighboring regions. People, especially within the Black community, organized numerous peaceful yet passionate protests that resonated widely in society. Discussions and social justice seminars became key gathering points for exchanging opinions, sharing experiences, and proposing solutions to eradicate injustice and racial discrimination. Alongside this, new civil rights groups emerged, while nonprofit organizations intensified policy advocacy and victim support efforts. The story of General Cassandra became a strong symbol, inspiring many individuals and organizations fighting for rights and social justice. Her image stood not only as a symbol of resilience, but also as proof of the power of truth and justice. For the police force, the event marked a crucial turning point. Police leaders began reviewing and reassessing policies and procedures to prevent similar incidents in the future. Cultural diversity and anti-racism training programs were implemented more rigorously and effectively than ever before. Awareness courses emphasizing respect for diversity and human rights became mandatory for all officers. At the same time, modern technology was increasingly applied to police oversight to enhance transparency and accountability. Recording devices were upgraded and data storage systems were secured more strictly to prevent illegal tampering or deletion of evidence. The working environment within the police force started to shift positively, contributing to rebuilding its image in the eyes of the community. This event also strongly impacted local and national governments. Local officials had no choice but to publicly disclose reform plans and open direct dialogues with the community to address ongoing grievances. Pressure from public opinion and social organizations accelerated the process of revising and improving public policies. Cassandra's story became a hot topic widely discussed by lawmakers and leaders across the United States, fueling broad debates on police reform. The media actively supported the movement by producing documentaries, articles, and in-depth television programs on these issues, raising public awareness about inequality and police violence. Forums and seminars were widely held, creating spaces for communities to listen, respond, and seek effective solutions together. Numerous influential figures, artists, and social activists voiced strong support, further energizing the movement for justice and transparency. This wave of change was not merely a momentary reaction, but had become a deeply rooted social movement, reshaping public awareness, promoting progressive policies, and fostering positive transformations within the police system and government. These developments marked the beginning of a long journey toward sustainable social justice and harmony. Following these significant trial developments, public perceptions of the legal system gradually shifted positively. As justice was enforced strictly, people's trust in the legal apparatus grew stronger than ever. The more thorough investigations of similar cases not only set a precedent for transparency, but also reinforced social fairness, helping restore public confidence. A spirit of hope was ignited, leading to stronger unity among diverse communities, forming a collective strength in the fight for rights and justice. Cassandra became a symbol not only of resilience in battle, but also a vibrant source of inspiration for social justice movements nationwide. Her image appeared widely in organizations, schools, and communities, conveyed as a profound lesson in perseverance and righteousness. Through this, the values Cassandra represented spread broadly, encouraging many to rise and fight for truth and justice in daily life. Legal reforms were vigorously promoted. New laws and policies aimed at enhancing citizens' rights and protecting them from abuses of power were enacted with growing consensus. The establishment of independent oversight committees, alongside transparent reporting mechanisms, created effective safeguards, ensuring that violations were not easily concealed. Concurrently, training and recruitment programs focusing on diversity were strengthened to combat racial discrimination within law enforcement, building a police force that respects human rights and fosters friendliness. Beyond legal changes, the importance of maintaining and developing trust in justice was deeply recognized within the community. Public education programs on citizens' rights and responsibilities were widely organized, helping people understand their role in protecting and building a fair society. Close cooperation between communities and police forces became the foundation for creating a safe, friendly, and equitable environment for all. Trust in justice was regarded as a solid pillar for social stability and sustainable development. When people trust justice, they are motivated to actively participate in social activities, thereby contributing to building a strong, united, and progressive community. The changes that Cassandra and her team brought about not only transformed the present, but also planted seeds for a brighter future, where everyone is respected and their rights are protected fairly and transparently. Cassandra stood before the mirror, gazing deeply into her own reflected eyes, reflecting on the journey she had just endured. The days filled with trials, pain, and tension had forged her into a stronger person, no longer the naive girl she once was. The recent events were not merely a legal battle, but also an internal struggle, allowing her to discover a hidden strength within, one that could not be measured by words or simple actions. Through every storm, Cassandra learned to remain calm in all situations despite relentless public pressure and harsh criticism. She mastered balancing emotion and reason, refusing to let feelings cloud her primary goals. Instead of wavering, she became increasingly composed and resolute in each step, demonstrating growth not only intellectually, but also spiritually. Her leadership spirit was also significantly reinforced. Cassandra was not only orchestrating legal strategies, but also inspiring her team and supporters. She knew how to listen, empathize, and convey messages profoundly, creating consensus and unity. These skills became a solid foundation, enabling her to lead others through the difficult challenges ahead. Cassandra's relationships with those around her grew stronger and deeper. Through sharing and mutual support, she built a trusted network of allies, not only within the legal field, but also in civil society and civil rights communities. Their empathy and understanding made her keenly aware of the responsibility and burden she bore, while also fueling her strength to keep moving forward. From this arduous struggle, Cassandra drew important lessons about perseverance and responsibility. She realized that victory was not an endpoint, but a continuous process of growth and change. This deepened her awareness of her role in defending justice, not just for herself, but for future generations. Her aspiration was not simply personal triumph, but a desire to become a source of inspiration that ignites the will to fight and hope in those suffering injustice. She understood that the greatest power lay in community connection and trust, and she was ready to continue the journey, to keep that flame burning in everyone's heart. Cassandra clearly understood that her mission extended beyond her personal battle to carry greater significance for the community. Her goal reached beyond immediate hardships to fight for justice and rights for the oppressed, those abandoned and hidden by the system's shadows. She remained steadfast in defending the truth, tirelessly raising social awareness about discrimination and abuse of power, to create a fairer environment for all. To realize this mission, Cassandra developed a well-structured strategy for the path ahead. She expanded legal support activities and closely coordinated with social organizations and responsible government agencies. Policy advocacy campaigns were conducted professionally, focusing on creating a broad and sustainable impact. Moreover, she leveraged her personal platform, social media, and communication channels to spread messages powerfully and deeply, reaching more audiences and generating widespread influence in society. Cassandra was also prepared to face the new challenges awaiting her. She understood that systemic change could not happen overnight, but required a long process filled with difficulties and obstacles. Her spirit remained firm against all resistance and attacks from opposing forces that sought to keep the truth hidden. To maintain her will, Cassandra actively honed leadership skills, pressure management, and perseverance, considering them essential weapons to overcome every storm. Her longing for a just and equal future always burned brightly in her heart. She placed trust in the strength of community and social progress as the energy driving change. With an unwavering commitment, she aspired to build a society where everyone is respected and protected, where discrimination no longer has a place. The belief that justice will ultimately prevail was conveyed through her every action and word, becoming a source of inspiration for those seeking fairness in life. Under the light of aspiration and persistence, Cassandra was not only a fighter, but also a symbol of hope. She knew the road ahead was long and full of challenges, but with determination and dedication, she would lead the community toward a brighter tomorrow. With sincerity and spiritual strength, she continued to inspire everyone to join hands in building a society that is just, equal, and humane. The final hearing took place in a high-security chamber, attended by representatives from the Department of Justice, military inspectors, and civil rights oversight agencies. The atmosphere was heavy even before the session began. All eyes were fixed on the defendant's table, where Ryan Caldwell sat, his face pale, hands rigidly placed on his chest. Those who had once supported him, from McRae Police Department to the local council, were notably absent. They had either been summoned or withdrawn from involvement. The first pieces of evidence were presented. Copies of server logs revealed data deletion activities under an administrative account coinciding exactly with the time Cassandra Moore was arrested. Internal emails were decrypted, exposing references to adjusting reports to fit templates, all traced back to Caldwell's computer. A recording from the administrative office played through the courtroom speakers, his voice harsh. "Don't let the blacks think they are equals." Before Caldwell could respond, testimony from an unexpected witness surfaced. A young officer who had worked with him stood, voice trembling but clear. "I saw him rewrite reports. I heard him say, 'This is McCrabb's rule.'" Layers of deceit were stripped away. Shields of protection were dismantled. The McCrabb Police Department was placed under a comprehensive investigation. The police chief resigned that same day. The city council came under temporary federal oversight. The once seemingly unbreakable system crumbled, not by a single blow, but by the cracks from within. Ryan Caldwell was left speechless. When questioned why he repeatedly engaged in misconduct over the years, he bowed his head, silent. His once crisp suit is now wrinkled. The badge was removed before the entire council and set down like a discarded object. His final scene was in the criminal prosecution waiting room. Head bowed in his hands, eyes hollow, as if he had lost everything, including himself. Public outrage surged. Major news outlets ran headlines, "The Truth of McRae County, the Manipulator and the Uprising." Those who had remained silent began sharing their stories. A former postal worker recounted being jailed for forgotten turn signals. A single mother told of being beaten in the street for disturbing the peace. They sought Cassandra out, calling her the one who awakened a long numb region shrouded in darkness. Cassandra spoke little. She quietly appeared at a press conference organized by the prosecutor's office, standing at the back, shunning the spotlight. Yet her silence and unwavering gaze became the focal point. When asked by a reporter, "Do you think this is the end?" she answered, "This is the beginning for many." That statement became the headline for numerous editorials in the following days. The press conference was specially held at the Department of Defense headquarters, a place where symbols of authority are usually paramount. But that day, the stage was not for honors or military ranks. Cassandra Moore stood at the podium in a simple suit, no epaulets, no nameplate. She declined the lengthy introduction from the host. When the microphone was on, she said plainly, "I do not stand here as an officer. I stand here as someone who was once locked in a cell, who heard the steel door shut behind me, who saw the eyes of the forgotten." No tears, no tremble in her voice. Cassandra recounted every detail about the isolation cell, the silence that felt like torture, and the eyes of a brown-skinned woman who embraced her when the cameras were off. She did not tell her story for sympathy. She told it so the room would listen, so witnesses would understand justice is not a single shining moment, but a long chain of perseverance. "I did not shout or scream because I understand some systems survive by waiting for rage to suppress, but they do not know what to do with someone who keeps the truth in silence." After the press conference, the Department of Defense announced the establishment of the Cassandra Fund, an independent organization providing legal and medical support for wrongfully detained victims nationwide. The government proposed awarding her a full general rank, but Cassandra declined. She requested to step down from command and moved to a senior advisory position on the System Reform Oversight Council. The new role had no medals, no parades, but it came with a desk, files, weekly reports, where she began exposing the very gaps that once ensnared her. The media hailed her as a symbol, a triumph of intellect over violence. But Cassandra never claimed that. For her, this was a continuation, a path for those whose voices were once denied but are now heard. When a reporter asked what she would say to young people of color facing suspicion simply because of their skin, she replied, "Do not rush to believe what they say you are. Listen to what you know to be true, and hold on to it at all costs." Cassandra did not write a memoir. She did not appear on evening television, but in private meetings, she was present, and in states once hotbeds of conflict, her name appeared on policy proposals, from banning prolonged administrative solitary confinement to mandating independent camera checks for all arrests. In her final report, Cassandra left a handwritten message. Justice is not about punishing someone. Justice is when wrongs no longer repeat. In a society that had learned to remain silent, she was the one who began the story with quiet action, with eyes that never wavered, and with a memory that refused to erase anything from history. And that changed everything.